Hi, this is Joe Armon-Jones and you're taking a little tour around my studio. I'm going to show you some of the gear that I use to make music, including the Space Echo, Spring Reverb and the Soundcraft desk. This studio, I refer to it as Aquarii Studios. It's my, apart from being my general home where I spend most of my time, it's essentially a haven for me to mix music, to produce music, to write music with people, and to come up with my own ideas and work on dub versions of stuff in an environment where the listening is treated and proper, so what I hear isn't a million miles away from what it will sound like on other speakers and stuff like that. So this is my Soundcraft Series 400B that I use on virtually every song that I make in some way. I really like the EQs, I like the smoothness of the desk and the faders and how they work. I like the saturation that I get from the desk. Everything about it I love. I also love how it looks. Like I was saying about the room, it fits that and it feels good to me. So yeah, big up Soundcraft, they make wicked desks. I tend to run tracks from my project, whatever I'm working on at the time, into the desk in a quite simple way because I don't have loads of outputs. I've got basically 8 channels that everything's have to get, you know, squashed down to. So I normally run it bass, drums, stereo track for percussion. I run drums mono normally, stereo track for percussion. 6, 7, 8 are like keyboards, chops, synthesizers, vocals, whatever else needs to fit into the tune. So yeah, the last 3 channels on the desk I will use for the top decorations, however you want to think of it, icing on the cake, cherry on the icing. And yeah, I run through that stuff into the desk and then I affect them with these 2 channels, which I normally have running as the Spring and the Space Echo, which is playing around today. But so I have the Space Echo looped into the desk, which is something that a producer friend of mine called Kabir Amlak showed me, which is really changed the way I mix actually and changed the way I make music. It was a very small thing that he showed me, but it really has completely changed the way I approach the desk and the echo particularly. So there's 2 inputs on the desk. One is instrument, one is from PA, and I used to just run it to the instrument one, which means you have to control the feedback of the delay like you control how much that's kicking off on the delay itself. So the intensity knob will control that. But then he showed me a way of routing it so you can actually control that just with the channel itself. So I send stuff to the delay and then I can decide how much it's being affected. So I'll give you an example. There's some drums. I can just keep it there and just get a little, or I can make it, if I run it up like that. And it took me a while even to understand what was happening there. But it's basically, you're sending the signal out into the Space Echo, back into the desk, and then it's feeding back off itself. So you actually I'm sending the Space Echo back to itself on this channel, and that's what creates the feedback loop, which means you can then jam the thing up and have the fader control it. It seems like a really small detail, but it actually means that when I'm making a dub of something, I have a lot more physical control over how much I can push things close to clipping or distorting, or you know, the sort of the grit that you can get from a space echo, you have to control it, and this allows me to control it in a much more musical and improvisatory way. So let me just run an example. It means all the movements are mixing desk movements, so I can be like, alright, I want everything to get real, and I can count, and I can be like, and it's a simple movement, rather than like, you know, computers make some things quicker, but they don't make that quicker. Like computers, it would take longer for me to do that movement, delay to feedback, to top of feedback where it's about to feedback on itself, and then bring the instruments back in and cut the delay. You could do that on here, but it wouldn't sound the same because it's not the space echo. Or even if you did it with using that, you'd have to record it in and then do a whole load of automation and do a whole load of track muting, and it'd be a, you know, 5-minute job, 10-minute job. So there are some things that the desk actually speeds up in terms of production and workflow. It's not just I like old stuff and I use old stuff instead of new stuff. It's like I really like this workflow, and when I'm trying to, if I'm making a tune, it doesn't have to be dub, it could be anything, and I'm thinking, oh, I want that little end of that sound to sort of tail off, so it doesn't just end, it tails off, you know. I can go in and automate the reverb or automate the echo, but it would take me longer, partly because there's so many more options with it that I will be tweaking the options for too long, and I don't really need to be doing that to things that people aren't going to hear anyway. So in the desk, I'll just run it in, record what I run in, maybe do another go if it's not quite how I want it, but I won't sit here all day redoing the same little bit of delay. So it saves me time in that respect as well. It's just a downside to using a tape echo, especially a faulty one, is that it stops every now and again, but that's just part of the fun. I mixed the whole album here, so the whole of All the Quiet Part 1 and 2 I mixed in this room. I recorded some overdubbing stuff on it, but the majority of the album was recorded before I'd built this studio. So I kind of, part of the reason I built the studio really is to finish this album, because it's something I wanted to mix. I mixed it myself, so to do that and not go insane switching between speakers and testing things in other rooms, I figured I kind of had to have a space that was sound treated. And every time I was speaking to other mixing engineers and unloading my kind of mixing worries on them, I was just getting the same advice all the time. People were just like, sort your room out and everything will get easier. Big shout out to Joker, who's an excellent mixing engineer. He mixed the previous album that I made with Maxwell Owin called Archetype, and he just again and again was just like, you can be as good as you want at mixing. Like if you don't have the right room, you won't be good at mixing, because you'll just be making bad decisions in a space where you can't make the right decision. So yeah, having this room, being able to move into it and be like, okay, by this date I'm going to finish these mixes of this album, was really helpful. Really helped me kind of see the end of see the finish line with the project. And yeah, just mixing your own album is quite an intense thing to do. It's a bit like, I can't even think of an example of what it's like. It's very, you get very self-critical and you lose your perspective quite easily on stuff, especially stuff that you've already written the music for, recorded with the musicians, rehearsed, you know, edited and produced, and then after hearing it maybe 500 to 1,000 times, now you're going to sit down and mix it. It's a difficult thing to do, but the bonus of doing that is that you make no sacrifices when it comes to sound. So I wasn't on anyone else's time while mixing the album. Basically, I was just in here on my own time, getting advice from other people who I think I respect their mixes, and just trying to come up with something that I think is personal to me, basically. The other thing that I use when I'm making a dub, or just in general, is the spring reverb. I really like the sound of this spring. You can touch it yourself, just let it do its thing. But like running the sound of the bass through the spring reverb, I really like. It's got a kind of weird distortion on it as well, and it's a very cheap reverb. Like, it's a physical reverb, but it only costs, like, you can get a spring for like 30 quid or something. Like, it's not loads of money. So compared to buying a plate reverb, that's this enormous plate that you need a corridor for and stuff like that. And also, I think there's very good emulations of plate reverbs, but I haven't heard so many emulations of spring reverbs that I think really do the justice and the job that I need in terms of that, like, kind of randomness of the sound. And just also from a sound design perspective, I find the spring really useful because it's my finger. I can touch it with my finger and create kind of textures, and then I can run the spring into the delay. It's kind of a unlimited amount of sounds that you can make using that, basically, because it's how you touch it, it's the texture of your finger on a spring. So it's, yeah, same way that I like the maneuverability of this, to run the delay and get the intensity going. I like the fact that the spring is open and it's there, and I can just give it a little touch and a little bang, and it saves me time, because I can go in. When it comes to sound design and stuff, you want to create let's say I've got a track that's too clean sounding and needs a bit of ambience, something in the background to fill it out, so you can it sounds like a real thing. I can do a lot more and a lot quicker with that than I can if I go in, try and sample and pull it apart, and I do like doing that as well, and I have a lot of friends who can do that. That's their way of making sound design. Maxwell Owin, who I mentioned earlier, won't do it like this. He'll do it in a different way in the box, and completely different sound and completely different effect, and he's very, very good at doing it, so he can do it very quickly. But that's not something it's something that bogs me down when I'm trying to do other stuff, so that's my way of doing it. The thing that I miss about mixing nowadays, to some extent, not in everyone's mixes, but generally mixes are very good, and they're just all very good, and there's a standard of, like, mixes are really good, you can hear all the instruments. I kind of miss the weird mixes that you get in the 70s and the 50s, 60s and the 80s, like in that period of time where people were kind of pushing the boat out a bit in terms of where you put stuff in the mix, panning, and how loud things have to be, how much reverb vocals have to have. There's a really good example of a song. It's a song called "The Meaning of Love" by Steve Kuhn, and it's just the mix is the weirdest mix. It's like a mix turned on its head, where, like, all the instruments that shouldn't have reverb, and all the things that should have reverb don't have reverb. So it's like the vocals is very dry, in your face, and then all the drums are like a million miles away in this other chamber, and it works really well. But it's not the decisions that I would make when I'm mixing a tune. So yeah, I wanted some of that process to go into the album basically. But yeah, that's the desk, the space echo, and the spring reverb, which I'm running through this Fisher space expander unit. I would pull it out, but it's kind of jammed in there. But yeah, these have been with me for quite a long time now. I've had these for about 5 years. They've travelled through 2 studios. Space echo I got very cheap. Got it for like £500 from Japan, I think, and then it was broken when I got it, and I've got it fixed up by a friend. But yeah, all in all, I think this and this only comes to like, I think it's like £1,000 for all that gear together, which sounds like a lot maybe if you're using emulation stuff, but to me that's definitely worth it for the amount that I've used it and the amount of time and the amount of songs that I've used these techniques on, you know. But when it came to making all the choir and mixing the album, this stuff was vital. Like the spring reverb and the space echo are basically the delay and reverb that I was pulling for on every song on the album. And the way I run them is through the desk, so it's the sound of the desk has kind of become part of the sound of the album in a way, because all of these things are getting transferred through the desk, transferred through space echo and stuff like that. So yeah, they're kind of connected in that way, really, that I wanted the album to have like we were talking before off camera, like another thing that I miss about old mixes that I tend to not hear as much nowadays is just using one reverb for the entire mix, and like everything has to. I'm not saying people don't do this at all, because it is done, but like we have so many options for reverbs and different timed reverbs and different spaces and different types of reverb. It can be like option paralysis, and the beauty of just having one reverb that you use, and you have to then make it work to what you use it for, and all the instruments that you are putting through it, all the instruments in a track that you want to have reverb are going through this same reverb channel and this same reverb space. So you end up with like a kind of you know, like the reverb chambers sounding like that, and it's all going in together. So you got and there's something about just knowing that all of those sounds are like passing through here, passing through the tape physically, that I find very childishly satisfying, I think is the word. Like my inner geek gets very excited about that. It's like scale electrics with music or something. These are the 3 main elements, and then the little tweak on the top that I completely stole from King Tubby. This is a direct, he did this and I think it's sick, so I'm trying to do it. It's not a, which is all of this stuff is, to be honest. This is all, if anyone isn't aware and is just like, oh, that's cool that he's come up with this way of making it. It's not. It's how dub was made, basically. So in the 70s, way before electro and dance music and all the stuff had come in, like people were doing this with mixing desks, using the mixing desk as an instrument, taking different things in and out, running them to tape delays, using the 2 heads of a tape machine to use it as a delay. Spring reverb, that soundboard and that sound design package is other people in the 70s, Jamaican artists who made that and invented it and gave it to the world. So I would not ever take any credit for that. But this is one of the most like usable bits of gear in terms of like you get a lot from just, it's like a step filter that just cuts through the sound, but it cuts through the sound in a choppy way. It's not a smooth like, it's a so each of these, they're all steps, so, and it gives it this kind of like slicing a sword through the sound effect, which I really like. I try and time it with the snare. Sometimes if you get it, you can kind of get like, but it just, yeah, it's another part of the setup that just gives you a bit of maneuverability with the sound, and you can really change things, especially when you're trying to make a version of something. So the original already exists, and now you're trying to make a dub version of it. Being able to cut around with the frequencies and stuff like that, you know, is really helpful, and it's just a unique sound. Mine doesn't sound anything like the original King Tubby's Altec filter that he used, but I don't really want it to. I'm happy that it sounds different, but that's a technique that he completely invented, using the MCI desk that just had that built in, a sort of filter that I guess it was built so you could do, you know, frequency correction and get rid of nasty frequencies that were in the music. But if you use it in this way, it just ends up being like makes it sound like space music. It's probably the easiest way of saying it. So yeah, that's a West Finger filter made by a wicked designer called West Finger, who I don't know how many he's built. He hasn't built that many. I don't think he does. I think he does them to order, but they're really good, really simple, not too complicated pieces of gear to use. You just have one big knob that you just mess around with. It's great fun.